My girlfriend turned out to be the stalker who ruined my last relationship, and I didn't believe my ex until it was too late. So, where do I even begin? I too used to be in a relationship with my ex-girlfriend, Sarah, to 6 female, for almost 5 years. For most of it, things were amazing. We were the kind of couple that people called solid. We communicated well, had similar goals, and genuinely enjoy each other's company. But during the last year of our relationship, everything started to change. Sarah became increasingly paranoid, and it felt like the carefree person I had fallen in love with was slipping away. She started claiming she was being stalked. It began with little things: random, threatening texts from unknown numbers, messages that made her skin crawl. At first, it seemed like a bad prank, but then it escalated. She began hearing strange noises outside her apartment late at night, scratches on the windows, footsteps in the hallway that never seemed to belong to anyone. Once, she came home to find her door unlocked, though she swore she had locked it before leaving. Her plants were mysteriously knocked over, and her belongings sometimes felt out of place, as if someone had been rummaging through them. I tried to be supportive at first, reassuring her that she was safe, helping her file a police report, and even suggesting she stay at my place more often. But no matter what we did, the harassment continued. She started seeing shadows in her peripheral vision, convinced someone was following her when she walked home from work. She'd jump at every sound and flinch at every unexpected knock on the door. It was like she was always on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder. As the months dragged on, I began to doubt her. There was never any tangible proof: no fingerprints, no video footage, no clear sign of an actual intruder. The police said there wasn't much they could do without evidence. I started chalking it up to anxiety or her imagination running wild. Maybe she was stressed from work. Maybe she was reading too much into normal, everyday coincidences. I kept telling myself she just needed time to calm down, that this was all in her head. The situation escalated to the point where it was affecting both of us in ways I hadn't anticipated. Sarah started changing her entire routine. She avoided her usual routes to work, stopped going to her favorite coffee shop, and even switched gyms because she felt like she was being watched. She insisted on staying at my place almost every night, saying she felt safer there, but even then, she'd spend hours double-checking the locks and windows. She'd pace around, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, waiting for another text to come through or another nose to confirm her fears. At first, I tried to accommodate her. I told her she could stay as long as she needed and even offered to help her install security cameras at her place, but her anxiety became relentless. Every creak in the floorboards, every unfamiliar sound outside, it all became evidence to her that someone was out to get her. She'd wake me up in the middle of the night because she heard something, and I'd spend half an hour reassuring her that nothing was there. I was exhausted mentally, emotionally, and physically. The breaking point came one night when she completely broke down. She was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching at my arm, begging me to believe her. She said she didn't feel safe anywhere anymore, that the constant fear was suffocating her, and all she needed was for me to take her concern seriously. I just sat there, staring at her, unsure of what to say. I didn't believe her. I wanted to, but without proof. It all seemed so far-fetched. I told her she was overthinking things, that maybe she should talk to someone, a therapist or counselor, because this seemed like anxiety more than anything real. That was the moment her face changed. She pulled her hand away from mine, her expression a mix of heartbreak and disappointment. She told me she couldn't stay in a relationship where she didn't feel believed or safe, and that my dismissiveness was making things worse. She packed up her things and left that night. I didn't stop her. I was too hurt and frustrated, convinced she was spiraling over nothing and that this breakup was on her. At the time, I thought I was the one being reasonable. Looking back, I realize I couldn't have been more wrong. Fast forward a couple of years, I met Emma, to 7 female, who seemed like the perfect match in every way. She was warm, supportive, and had this natural ability to make me feel at ease, even about things I'd struggled with for years. For the first time since Sarah, I felt like I could open up to someone without fear of being judged. Our relationship moved quickly. Dinners turned into weekend getaways, and weekend getaways turned into talks about the future. It just felt right, like we were meant to find each other. Emma knew about Sarah. I didn't go into too much detail, but I shared the basics: how our relationship fell apart, how I'd struggled with guilt after the breakup, and how I regretted not being more patient with her. Emma would listen intently, her hand on mine, reassuring me that I'd done my best under the circumstances. She told me that relationships are complicated and that sometimes people just grow apart. Her understanding nature made it easy for me to trust her completely. But then strange things started happening. At first, it was small little coincidences that I didn't think much of. Emma would bring up random details about my life, things I didn't remember telling her. For example, during a conversation about coffee, she casually mentioned Sarah's favorite order, a caramel latte with oat milk. I froze for a second, confused, because I knew I'd never mentioned that to her. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I'd told her in passing and forgotten. After all, Emma was incredibly attentive. Maybe she just had a better memory than I did. Then, there was the time we were planning a weekend trip, and Emma suggested visiting a specific park. She described it in detail: the jogging trails, the quiet benches, even the small coffee cart near the entrance. It was a park I used to go to all the time back when I was dating Sarah, but I hadn't been there in years. I hadn't even posted about it online or talked about it with anyone since then. When I asked her how she knew about it, she shrugged and said she must have read about it somewhere. The little things started to add up. She'd know the exact date of events from my past without me telling her, like when I graduated college or when I moved into my first apartment. She even remembered the name of a pet I had as a kid, something I hadn't thought about in years. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if I was just forgetting how much I'd shared with her. After all, we talked about so much, it was possible, right? But as these moments became more frequent, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't adding up. One night, while we were watching TV, Emma laughed during a casual conversation and said something that sent a chill down my spine. "I remember when you used to jog at specific park every Saturday morning. You looked so focused," she said with a smile, as if it were just an innocent comment. For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd said. That park wasn't just any park, it was one I used to frequent during my relationship with Sarah. I hadn't gone jogging there in years, not since the breakup. It wasn't even a place I ever mentioned to Emma, not in passing, not in conversation, not even on social media. There was no reason she should have known about it.
My stomach dropped. I forced myself to stay calm and casually asked, "How do you know that?" Emma's demeanor shifted instantly. She looked flustered, her smile faltering for the first time.
"Oh, maybe you told me once," she said, shrugging and trying to laugh it off. But her voice was different, lighter, almost nervous, like she was scrambling to find an explanation that wouldn't raise suspicion. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her answer, but in my gut, I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't remember ever mentioning that park to her. It wasn't like we talked in detail about the places I used to go years ago, especially ones tied so closely to my past relationship. I replayed every conversation we had in my head, trying to pinpoint a moment where I might have let that detail slip. But the harder I thought, the more certain I became that I hadn't. As Emma turned her attention back to the TV, I sat there in silence, my mind racing. How could she know that? Was it really just something I'd forgotten, I told her, or was it something else? That comment lingered in my mind long after the show ended, casting a shadow over the easy comfort I'd once felt with her. It was the first time I truly began to question everything. This led me to do something I'd never done before. I snooped. I'd never been the kind of person to invade someone's privacy like that, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't let me rest. One evening, while Emma was in the shower, she left her phone on the coffee table. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, battling with guilt and curiosity. I told myself I just needed to put my mind at ease, that I was probably overthinking everything. But the moment I opened her photo gallery, my entire world shifted. There, tucked away in a hidden folder, was a collection of old photos of me, photos from years ago, long before Emma and I had even met. Some were harmless enough, candid pictures of me jogging at the park or sitting at a cafe. But others were unsettling. They were taken from strange angles, like someone had been watching me from a distance. There were photos of me walking to my car, leaving my old apartment, and even one of me laughing with Sarah outside a restaurant. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding as I realized these weren't moments I ever shared. These were moments someone else had captured without me knowing. I kept scrolling, hoping there was some explanation, anything to prove this wasn't what it seemed. But then, I found screenshots of Sarah's old social media posts, ones she had made during our relationship. Emma had saved them all, from casual selfies to posts about her life. There were even screenshots of arguments Sarah and I had commented on publicly, with timestamps from years ago. Then, the most damning discovery, the threatening messages. In another folder, Emma had saved screenshots of the very same messages Sarah had shown me back then, the anonymous, cruel texts that Sarah had insisted were from her stalker. My breath caught in my throat as I realized Emma wasn't just an observer. She had been the one behind it all. My hands went cold as everything began to click. Emma had been obsessing over me for years, long before we'd ever spoken. She had sabotaged my relationship with Sarah, feeding her fear and paranoia until it drove us apart. And once Sarah was out of the picture, she had somehow found a way to slide seamlessly into my life, portraying herself as the perfect match. I put the phone down, my heart racing and my mind spinning. I felt sick. Everything I thought I knew about Emma, about our relationship, was a lie. This wasn't just deceit, it was calculated, obsessive, and terrifying. The person I had trusted, the person I thought I loved, had been the source of so much pain, not just for me but for Sarah, too. Confronting her was a nightmare. I waited until she came out of the shower, my hands still trembling, my mind racing with everything I had just uncovered. I held her phone in my hand and asked her, as calmly as I could manage, why she had photos of me from years ago, photos taken without my knowledge. Her expression froze, her usual confidence slipping as she tried to piece together an explanation. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaking ever so slightly. I didn't back down. I laid everything out, the photos, the screenshots of Sarah's posts, and the saved copies of the threatening messages. At first, she denied it all, scrambling to come up with excuses. She said she must have saved the photos because she liked looking at me, that the screenshots were just things she stumbled across online, and the messages were just coincidences. But as I pressed her, her defenses crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Through her tears, she admitted it was all true. She confessed that she had been watching me for years, long before we'd met. She said she couldn't stand seeing me with Sarah, that she hated the way Sarah treated me, and that she had sent those messages to protect me. Her voice cracked as she tried to justify her actions, spinning some twisted narrative where Sarah was the villain and she was the hero, trying to save me from a toxic relationship. "I only did it because I love you so much," she said, as if that would somehow make it better. I sat there in silence, horrified. The person I thought I knew, the kind, understanding, perfect partner, was nothing more than a facade. She wasn't just a liar, she was manipulative, obsessive, and dangerous. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah hadn't been paranoid or crazy. She had been stalked, terrorized, and gaslit, and I hadn't believed her. I had failed her when she needed me most. The guilt is unbearable. I replay at every moment of my relationship with Sarah in my mind. All the times she begged me to take her seriously. All the times I dismissed her fears as irrational. I wonder how different things might have been if I had just listened to her. Now, years later, Sarah is still in therapy, trying to heal from the trauma Emma caused. And I'm left trying to figure out how to process the betrayal of someone I thought I could trust. Needless to say, Emma and I are over. I've blocked her on everything, her number, her social media accounts, every possible way she could reach me. But, of course, Emma didn't back down easily. After I ended things, she tried to twist the story to make herself look like the victim. She went to some of our mutual friends and spun a completely different narrative, claiming I was overreacting and that everything she'd done was out of love. She told them she had only saved the photos and messages because she wanted to preserve our memories, painting herself as this sentimental person who just cared too much. She made it sound like I was paranoid and unfair, accusing me of invading her privacy and blowing things out of proportion. "I just wanted to make him happy," she told them, feigning tears, trying to gain their sympathy. Some of our friends even reached out to me, confused and asking for my side, because Emma's version of events made it seem like I had suddenly cut her off without reason. What made it worse was how convincing she could be. Emma was incredibly good at playing the victim, manipulating people into seeing her as this sweet, misunderstood person. She tried to twist the situation into something romantic, telling people that she had been keeping track of the little things because she cared so much about me, as if that justified years of stalking and sabotage. It was disgusting to watch her turn something so sinister into some warped love story. I had to explain the truth to my friends, showing them the evidence I found, those photos, the threatening messages, everything. Some of them were horrified and immediately sided with me, but others hesitated, caught up in Emma's charm and her carefully crafted excuses. Even after being exposed, she refused to take accountability, instead doubling down on her lies and trying to discredit me at every turn. I've spoken to a lawyer and am considering legal action, but I know it won't undo the damage that's already been done. The harm she caused, not just to Sarah but to me as well, is something that will take years to recover from. And now, I also have to live with the fact that someone I trusted so completely was capable of such calculated DC-10 that she tried to manipulate everyone around me even after being caught. I reached out to Sarah to apologize. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. After everything that had happened, I felt a deep sense of shame that I could barely put into words. I wrote her a long message, telling her that she was right all along, that she wasn't crazy, and that I should have believed her when she told me about the stalking. I told her how sorry I was for dismissing her fears, for not standing by her, and for letting Emma manipulate me. I wanted her to know that I saw the truth now, that I understood the pain she had been through, and that I regretted every moment I'd made her feel like she was imagining things. I gave her the space to process everything, fully understanding that my apology couldn't undo the damage. I told myself that it was possible she might never respond, that she might never want to hear from me again. And yet, I waited, days turned into weeks, and there was still no word. She hasn't responded, and I don't blame her. I don't know if she ever will. Even if she does, I'm not sure where we'd go from there. The trust was shattered long ago, and even though I've come to understand everything now, I know that the pain I caused her won't just disappear because of a simple apology. She went through years of trauma, and no matter how deeply sorry I am, I can't undo that. I don't know if she ever forgive me or if I even deserve to be forgiven. It's a heavy truth to carry, knowing that I failed her when she needed me most. And now, I have to live with the weight of that guilt, the knowledge that my own actions, my doubts, my dismissiveness contributed to the suffering she endured. For now, all I can do is try to move forward. I don't expect things to ever go back to normal, and I don't deserve for them to. All I can do is live with the consequences, try to make sense of the mess Emma left in her wake, and hope that, somehow, I can make things right in some small way, whether that means working on myself or trying to rebuild the trust I broke with Sarah, even if it's too late.